Sveicināti, cienījamie skatītāji! Jūsu ekrānos raidījums Kāpēc un es, Alinu Lastovsku. Latvija, līdzīgi kā vairākas citas valstis, virzās uz izstāšanos no Otavas konvencijas. Un diskusijās par šo jautājumu Saeimā tika uzsverts. Ir svarīgi parādīt visiem, kā demokrātijas nav vājas, un tās spēj sevi aizstāvēt ar visiem pieejamiem līdzekļiem un arī ieročiem. Bet kāda ir situācijā Eiropā kopumā? Vai tā gatava sevi aizstāvēt un arvien vairāk palīdzēt Ukrainai? Un kā likt ASV prezidentam Donaldam Trumpam ieklausīties Eiropas līderos? Par šiem un citiem jautājumiem intervija ar Lietuvas bijušo ārlietu ministru Gabrieļu Landsberģi. Hello, Mr. Landsberģis. Thank you for having this conversation. I really wanted to have a face-to-face interview, but I understand that your schedule is really tight now. We are recording this interview on Tuesday. It will be broadcasted later because we have to translate it. But I'd like to start our conversation with a quote from another Baltic politician, now European Union High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security, Kaja Kallas. So she said, "Today it became clear that the free world needs a new leader. It's up to us Europeans to take that challenge." She said after US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had this argument, and I wanted to ask, so watching Donald Trump rhetorics, you also agree with this opinion? We have to find a new leader for a free world.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe that there's any other choice. Wherever I travel, whoever I talk to, everybody is asking whether there will be those who will step up. In some cases, practically replacing, lost assistance from the United States, such as USAID, or the media channels who are unable to continue their work, such as Radio Free Europe. All of them are asking, who will step up? And the only answer I can give them, well, I hope that it's Europe. I hope that Europe does understand the task that it has at hand and is ready to take it.
But we have a lot of politicians in Europe. Is there such a leader?
Well, so first of all, we're questioning whether Europe itself, as a union, would be able to step up. I have not yet lost hope. I would wish to see Europe stepping up as a union, because I believe that there are tasks that are greater than any country in European Union. Well, of course, Germany can do a lot, and specifically now when we see the new government that is being formed and how much, for example, financial resources they are able to put on, to defense. That's clearly, a very strong statement. But even Germany would not be able to carry all the weight that 27 countries of European Union would be able to carry. So I'm still hoping that the leadership could come from the Union. Unfortunately, the statement that you've showed from Kaja Kallas has been made already some time ago. And until from that time till now, there have not been a major developments when it comes to, for example, helping Ukraine, helping Georgia, helping any other country that are now facing increasing problems. So
but
clearly,
you still have hope. Why so?
Well, because that's the last hope that I have. If Europe doesn't wake up, then we are in really bad situation. Every single one of us.
Okay, but I would like to talk about much about Donald Trump, his rhetorics. Is there something in his actions or statements that make you think that he will achieve an outcome in peace talks that will be acceptable for Ukraine as well?
Well, I don't believe that he's interested in peace in Ukraine, honestly. I don't think that he has this whole goal. I think that we're talking about a very different, different scenarios or different explanations to what is actually happening. I have a couple of them in my mind. One of them is that is usually spoken about that maybe he really and he and his advisors are keen on splitting the Chinese-Russian alliance. And this is the reason why he's offering so much to Russia and not doing anything to help Ukraine. So the second explanation could be that maybe he sees the world very differently. The world where just the strong, have the right to survive. If you're strong, then you're able to take what you need, and this would explain his his rhetorics on Canada, on Greenland, on Panama. That would explain why he is, basically willing to give Ukraine away to Russians. So, but in none of these explanations, I see, any reason to believe that he's genuinely interested in safe and secure Ukraine. Nothing has been shown that it would be that way.
Some of Latvian politicians, for example, our Prime Minister Evika Siliņa and others, they commented that there is no need to interpret any of each of Trump's statement, and that US remains our reliable strategic partner. And I'd like to ask your opinion. Can we really be sure that US still is our reliable partner?
Well, I do understand that the acting politicians are in tough position. We depend in Baltic states so much on the United States assistance, security assistance, that basically it's, we find ourselves almost incapable to say anything that we doubt or, that the situation has changed. But when you look at it, I mean, if Ukraine is forced to forego the territories that are occupied currently by Russians, or if we take Witkov's comments for granted, that these territories are full of Russians and they probably have been always Russian and Russia has a right to basically have them. Look, the same rhetoric could be easily applied to any of our countries. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we all have Russian minorities, and if that applies to Ukraine, and if Putin asks something like that to be accepted in our countries, I don't know why the United States would stand. I might hope that somehow they would see difference, but in what way? So, I mean, what is happening now, it is very dangerous, incredibly dangerous. And one thing is to say publicly that we trust the United States, but I hope that politicians do understand that this is a time to prepare for a very different world that has already started to take shape.
So you are not an active politician right now. You are more like an expert, right? But you were a politician. So is this the right tactics to try to calm down the society and say those statements, or it's better to, to say the truth?
Well, there's a fine line. I understand those who don't want panic in their country, especially in small countries like ours. But then there is another point in this on this line where people will start to understand that the reality is already different from what the politicians are telling them. People do read news. They do understand and able to interpret what President Trump or his team is saying. They do understand what Ukrainians are saying. So, to say that nothing is changing, I think that it goes counter the intuition of the people, and they might get scared, not because the politicians are telling them, that something is bad happening, but that the politicians are hiding something. So I think that honesty is the best tactics in this regard. And, when I was a minister, I usually would prefer to say the things, as they are, because I believe that there is a high need for mobilization of our people. If we really want to achieve, 5% of our spending to GDP spending to defense, we really need to have a conversation with our people. People are not just going to open up their wallets and say, okay, fine, just take my money. But I mean, if everything is so well, why should we be paying that much? Same thing goes, for example, for the conscription. If we expect our people to bring their children basically to the military, they have to know why should they be doing that.
Okay, you mentioned the news, and I'd like to ask you about one piece. So it was a piece by The Atlantic that the Trump administration accidentally texted its worst plan to one of the journalist editor-in-chief. Actually, how you can comment on that issue?
I honestly don't know. I hope that it's just a one-off mistake, and I hope that Russians are not participating in some other chats.
Okay, but speaking of security in our region and NATO guarantees, we also heard various stations by Donald Trump, and there was one Financial Times article that European military powers work on 5-10-year plan to replace US in NATO. Can this soon become a reality, NATO without US?
It can. It definitely can. I mean, I've always talked about one scenario where Putin, during his negotiations with Trump would ask something that has been voiced before, NATO retreating to 1997 borders. Lavrov mentioned that just before the Russian attack on Ukraine in 2021. So I really see that there is a possibility that Trump would say, okay, fine, we're removing US troops from Europe or from part of Europe, and the situation is already very different, from then on. So the plans that have been discussed in the article, 5 to 10 years, I think that they are good. I mean, it's good that people are thinking this.
Yeah, but do we have those 5-10 years?
That is the main question. That is the main question. I mean, those plans mean that Putin will be graciously granting us time. And he knows that we are not really prepared, that we are even worse prepared without the Americans. And therefore, if we're talking about the really dangerous period, is from now until we're prepared. This is the time of danger. One of the hopes lies in Ukrainians. We still have to, we cannot forget that Ukraine has been fighting for 3 years. They've been successful, and they've been guarding us. The reason why Russians are not advancing, further, why they're not threatening directly the Baltic states now, is because Ukrainians are, still giving them hell in the eastern part of the country.
You also tweeted about Ukraine that the question of Ukraine joining NATO is when, not if, and that was agreed by all allies. So you would say it's like 5, 10 years, 15 years, or we cannot say that time limit now?
Yeah, my reaction was to a statement or a comment made by Secretary General of NATO when he was asked whether still Ukraine's admission to NATO is still on the table. He said no, and I thought that it's important to react because even I sat at the meetings where all the leaders of the NATO countries agreed that this is the question of just how it will happen rather than if. And now suddenly, it all changes. So, I've always been of the opinion that the real security guarantee is NATO. And now it even, it goes both ways. That meaning that Ukraine accepted into NATO is also more security for us. Not just for Ukraine, because we always have been thinking that, it would be difficult for us to defend Ukraine. But now I want Ukraine on our side. If Lithuania is in danger, I'd rather face that danger with a brigade or division of Ukrainian soldiers who have actually fought Russians, who were able to win against Russians. And I would very much like them to see, helping us defend the Baltic countries. So there is an added element to how much we need Ukraine in NATO.
But not all NATO countries now agree to this statement, would you say?
Well, I mean, it clearly is a question of United States position, but it has to be debated in NATO summit, right? So that means that there have been documents adopted, and we would need to adopt a new one. If the situation is already different, if the countries do not agree, if a certain country does not agree that Ukraine should become a member of NATO, then we all meet, We all talk and then we figure out a new document. Until that hasn't happened, the NATO doctrine stands.
If we talk about future, NATO future, will we be able to protect ourselves without US involvement here in Europe?
Well, at this stage, it's a very difficult task, honestly. I mean, we've depended on United States for for many things. We're still sluggish, let's say, or slow with our defense spending, with mobilization, with defense plans and regional defense plans and stuff like that. So, my point is that if we move fast and if we really admit the change of the situation that is happening so rapidly, that means that it would allow us to also to adapt the situation. I'm not losing hope. I mean, I've seen things happening even faster in the past when when countries wanted it. So we are able. If we wanted, we have the money, we have political will if we want. But the biggest problem is that there are still politicians who do hope that the situation is either has not changed, or if it changed, then it will change back, or maybe Putin is just too tired and he's not going to continue. So there is a lot of wishful thinking in this.
I would like to talk even about our region. Baltic states understands the threat from Russia, but even it took a lot of time to withdraw from Ottawa Convention. Haven't we delayed this decision?
No, I mean, the decision itself is a right one. And, I don't think that there's a big difference if we had made it, half a year ago or a year ago. My main questions, for example, if we would have done the same thing like Poland did, right, to reach the 4% of investment, where we would be now with our defense, capabilities if we started like 5 years ago. Most of the things that we would have ordered back then would be arriving by now, right? And we are still discussing how we are going to reach it. So if we discuss it for at least a year, we purchase something in 26, and then I don't know, in 35, things start to arrive. This is a very long time, considering that Putin is already prepared, has 1.5 million army, and and now he's getting a United States blessing on changing countries' borders in Europe. So the danger is literally now. I did some easy calculations, like on the side of a napkin. For example, Finland is a good example. They have about 800,000 of their reserve. That means that 800,000 Finns are prepared to fight in case there is an attack on Finland. In our case, in 3 Baltic countries, if we were to have the same number, the same percentage of our people prepared for reserve, it would be close to 900,000 in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So, if you're determined, then you suddenly start building up some serious numbers that can on its own work as a deterrent. So, but we cannot wait.
Okay, today, 25th March, we remember the victims of mass deportations and communist genocide. Can we be sure that nothing like that can happen in future?
Well, we have to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, if we talk about security, about in our countries, in Baltic states, what do you think? Can Russia attack us in near future?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the way that things are going, I would not exclude that possibility, especially if the situation does get worse, meaning that U.S. withdraws or limits its participation in European security. Our allies are not quick enough, to build up. We ourselves do not muster the defense capabilities. And look again. I mean, the attack can happen in several ways. Suddenly we might start hearing that, I don't know, take Narva or any other city, that is suddenly needs to be protected or something like that. And it starts from talks, it starts from narratives, and then a build up, and who knows what happens next. So I do hope that our leaders are really thinking about these scenarios and drafting out plans. What happens in case of Russia is successful? United States is not here. The Western partners are not yet ready. So what do we do then? But
in this few years, when we actively discuss about our defense, increasing our percent of GDP, we are to spend security spending. So are we better prepared here now in Baltics if something happens, crisis, or I don't want to say attack.
Yeah, I understand. From what I see, always I use Baltic states as an example that we are still the best prepared. Take our region, from Finland to Poland, to Romania. Basically, we understand the threat the best. But that shouldn't work as a complacency. It shouldn't bring up complacency in us. That yes, we do understand. Yes, we are better prepared. Yes, we did more homework than anybody else. But unfortunately, this also might not be enough. We need not to be better than everybody. We need to be better than those who are willing to attack us. That has to be our goal.
When can we achieve this goal? I don't know, 5 years, or you cannot predict this?
No, I mean, if we think about the way that the military planning is working, right? So in order to fully implement the regional defense plans, that means that we have to have certain equipment that we have to purchase, and it takes a lot of time just to build up financial resources, to make the purchase, to allow it to arrive. And and we are doing that in Lithuania. We're purchasing heavy tanks, and they will arrive sometime, I don't know, in the next 5 years or something like that. But I think that while we are waiting for that, while we're doing these things that are necessary, probably we need to think about the other things that we could do now. That's why I'm talking about the conscription. That's why, probably taking in the lessons of Ukraine, the way that they're using the drones could be really useful. Rethinking the regional alliances, how do we help each other? How Lithuania will help Latvia, how we all help Estonia in case there is something, who is the first responder? How do we get Poland really active in our region? How do we work with Nordic countries? So start thinking about the things, not just waiting for delivery from the factory that might take a long time, but also what can we do immediately right now.
You talk about a lot of political decisions, politicians, but what can society do by themselves, I don't know, to prepare for a crisis?
Well, I believe that one thing is that societies usually are good at is asking questions from the political leaders. Really, to ask for a clear plans of how things would be happening. So this is important, and then I think that we need to understand that Ukraine survived because its people and leaders decided to stay and fight. If there is a lesson in the war against Ukraine that Ukrainians should have taught us, is that our countries will be our responsibility. And we have to be ready to take it, as a citizen, as a parent, as just a normal person in any of our countries. It is our responsibility. We have to do that. If something happens, it will be us defending our countries if we want our countries to survive.
You already mentioned Steve Witkoff. I'd like to ask about some of his statements. He said in one interview that he doesn't believe that Putin wants to invade Europe. You already commented on Twitter that, the Trump-Putin pact already exists. You also said about Mr. Witkoff that he is repeating Kremlin lies. And I'd like to ask, why do some Americans, especially those in power, repeat the Kremlin narrative?
Well, I try to really kind of explain the possible thinking of the way that I think about how Washington thinks currently. And most likely it is possible that, leader like Trump, he sees other, post-liberal leaders as, his counterparts, the only people who do matter. So it's a strong man such as Putin, such as Xi, maybe, Erdogan of Turkey, such people, they gather respect, and, it's okay to talk with them. Everybody else are just, noise. So if Putin tells him something, then, you respect that, and you give it back. And clearly Putin does not see it that way. For him, everybody is a tool that he will use to get his goals. Whatever the strategy, whatever the plan, whatever the appreciation comes his way, he will use it in order to get his way. So yes, of course, if somebody lends him an ear, if somebody wants to listen to him, so he will pour all the lies. And if people kind of think that, he's respecting, that this is a show of respect, and then they will just repeat everything that Putin told them. And now we're reading all the...
So what can we do as Europe to make Trump repeat our thoughts, statements, and our narrative?
Well, that might not be so easy. First of all, it's good that we rebuke, we explain, that Ukrainians do explain. That is, that's very important, not to let the lie, just spread if we can do that. But on the other hand, there is no better recipe for Europe just to prepare for the situation that will be dramatically different, because it is possible that the chances are greater than zero that when Trump and Putin will meet, Trump will also repeat what Putin have told him. And that might be a truly horrible thing to listen to us in Baltics, to anybody in Europe. That might happen. So it's best to be prepared for that. Make Europe stronger, make Ukraine stronger, prepare to fight Russians, help Ukraine fight Russians. This is how you get respect at the end.
About helping Ukraine, I was asking about can we protect ourselves without US, but the question is also, can we help enough Ukraine without US?
Yeah, we can. Honestly, we can. I wouldn't be able to tell the percentage, but it's definitely more than half of the attacks that Ukrainians are making now against Russians are using their own produced devices. It's either drones or missiles or anything that they have, but mainly they are fighting the war with their own means. So helping them, when 2 years ago we would say, look, we did not have the equipment, it's very difficult for us to help Ukrainians. Now it's easier. Basically now helping Ukrainians means helping their industry. Build more drones, build more rockets, build more equipment, and they are able to do that. Danes were very successful with that, helping Ukrainians in Ukraine. And if more of us joined in, if EU as a whole would join in that effort, I think we would see very different results. There was your tweet about you as a whole helping Ukraine. You as whole helping Ukraine. We can show it on a screen. You said that you filtered out the noise and made a list of all the things Europe has actually done in past months to help Ukraine in reality, and there was like an empty space. So we are not doing enough. No, I mean. If I really looked into the decisions that have been made by the European Union, and I did not find anything, really. I mean, there was a rollover of sanctions that happens every 6 months. And just this time, Hungarians blocked it. And the only way that Europe was able to renew the sanctions was by taking out 4 oligarchs from the list. So actually, we made sanctions weaker, not stronger. And that was that. So, I mean, I see a lot of posturing. I see a lot of, great headlines that, it's the moment of Europe. Europe is waking up. But that at the end of the day, there's nothing. There's silence. And I'm worried that this is a sign of European weakness. And then we expect, Putin to respect us and to fear us, not to attack us. We expect Trump to respect us. It's not going to happen.
But you're ex-politician, so why we have all the statements and no action in result?
Well, because the people are demanding that of us. There are a lot of people in Europe, in all of our countries, in Latvia and Lithuania, in other countries, who demand action. They cannot comprehend when politicians just don't do anything. So if a person comes back from Brussels and says, oh, unfortunately, this time we just didn't make a decision, people would be unhappy. Your ratings might fall, you might lose the next election. So you have to tell something. And then you're telling, well, the great day for Europe. Europe is starting to wake up and another meeting is being called.
And no action.
And no action.
Okay, there was also Kaja Kallas' plan of helping Ukraine, about 40 billions of military aid. No agreement on this plan. So is the problem in the ability to convince partners? And what to do?
Yeah, some of our partners are working for Russians. So it is very difficult.
Hungary and...
Yeah, mainly Hungarians. They are, clearly Russian, agents within the European Union and going against any security interest of.
It's actually a very strong statement. So, and there was a lot of discussions before European Parliament elections, what to do about decisions and rights to vote, and a lot of ideas. What can we do about Hungary? And
there is it's called Article 7. It's a special procedure in the European Union Treaty when a country goes consistently against the interest or fundamental values, more like of European Union. There is a chance, if all the other 26 countries agree, to take away the veto right of that country. It's a very difficult procedure. It requires multiple steps, but if successful, basically that would remove the ability to block all the decisions. And in principle, that would allow for certain points to be reformed within the European Union.
But somebody have to initiate this process.
Yes, exactly.
And nobody does that.
Nobody does that. I've argued that I think that it is time at least to initiate. It might fail, who knows, because there are multiple steps, multiple votes, maybe somebody will start supporting Hungary, who knows. But just start it. Because it is clear that we are unable, we are paralyzed. And there is, I wouldn't be wrong in saying that European future is at stake. If Putin decides to be aggressive against the European Union, there might be not European Union anymore. And, who are going to blame then? Are we going to blame Hungarians? That, well, yes, of course, we were attacked because Hungarians, but we didn't do anything. It's not just about them, it's about us as well.
But that has been a long discussion about what to do with Hungarians. So, and still no action, as we mentioned earlier. So, do you see that somebody will initiate this process?
I'm not, acquainted now with the discussions within the European Council or Foreign Affairs Council. I don't know. I know that there are people who are frustrated. I read their public statements, people coming out of the meetings and saying, well, the decision was blocked. I'm sure that, a high representative is also, put in a very tough position, making, kind of having high expectations of, a possibility of change the way that the council works. And now, being stopped at every single step. So clearly there is a lot of resentment. But we need to change the resentment, change this, emotion into the action. So, you're politicians, you have the instruments, you can start things.
One more topic is Western troop deployment in Ukraine. We have a lot of discussions about this decision as well. We also heard criticism that Starmer's Ukraine peacekeeping plan dismissed as political theater. What do you think about those critics?
Well, first of all, I have to mention this, that I was quite disappointed that the Baltic countries were not, represented or not invited. Actually, it would have been, I'm sure, represented if their invitation would have been there. this is not a good way to do it. I mean, already, I mean, the trust is the main thing that we have, right? So we need to trust. If we see that our trust with our main transatlantic ally is a bit somewhat in a tough situation, so really we have to build up trust with those that we have, and we are most at risk. We are, the first line of European and NATO, defense. So if we're not invited, that means that if somebody's talking about the European defense, they're talking about us without us. So I'm really disappointed that this has happened.
And that UK Prime Minister has apologized for that. It means actually nothing?
No, I mean, apology is good, but I mean, I would very much like to see us invited and sitting at the table and participating in the discussions.
Are you sure we won't be excluded from making important decisions in future?
That is my point. That is my point. I mean, okay, once might be a mistake, but we've seen those mistakes happening in the past for many, many times. And just, recall the 2022 when the war started, and there were, a lot of high officials saying, oh, we should have listened to the Baltics. So, I mean, now it's a good time to start. I mean, we do have opinion on how to defend Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia. So it's really strange that we're not invited. Now, when it comes to the actual, plans, it's tough for me to say how they will, go forward. One of the things that has to be discussed from the very beginning is what President Macron is saying, that we have to reject and refuse any opinion on option that we will be listening to Putin's, words. We don't care what Putin will say. Will he accept, European troops? Will he not accept? This is our decision and Ukrainian decision. If Ukrainians are asking us, we're going to send it. And that is it. And also we have to explain this to our people that actually we are going there to help Ukraine because Ukraine is helping us now. We are not under attack because Ukraine is fighting the war for us. So if we help them, it is less likely that the war will come to us. That is the way that it has to be framed. And this is how we should be sending the troops. So I'm fully supporting of the idea. I hope that it goes through, and we'll see how it works.
You also had an interview with my colleagues from Latvian television, and you also spoke on this topic, and you said that it's a very difficult step. It will never be popular. If you go out and have a referendum on that, I don't think you would win. So should be public involved in making this decision?
Well, in democracies, it's unavoidable that publics are involved, right? Either through a direct mandate, like a referendum, or perceived mandate, where the leaders of the country say, "Okay, I'm doing this because I made a promise to the people during the election to make my country safe," and this is one of the ways how making the country safe, and and try to explain the best way that you can why you're making this decision. I mean, as in any democracy, it's possible, and not likely, but possible that people will vote for somebody else. But it's, you do what you do because you have to do it. So just do what you do and explain it to society? Yes, exactly. There's no other way.
Okay, also we are talking about reassurance force, not a peacekeeping force, and numbers are quite small about, if it say about soldier number. Can we achieve agreement or larger number of soldiers? What do you think?
I think that the main point is, what do we want to achieve with this? My understanding is that the European troops in Ukraine should work as a deterrent for further Russian attack. That basically Ukraine is incorporated into European security space. That this is it. That next time, if there is a next time, Ukraine is not fighting alone. If we are going to stand there like the blue helmets in Bosnia when people were massacred, and the blue helmets just did not have a mandate and they looked away. Well, that's not very reassuring to Ukrainians. I don't think that it would send a very good signal to our populations as well. So what are we doing there? We were sent there just to observe, to take note. So it has to be clear. We have to deter. We want Ukraine to be safe, never to be attacked again.
Yeah, but we saw in BBC article that troops would most likely be deployed to protect cities, ports, and major energy infrastructure. Will it be effective?
Well, it is, it is a deterrent, right? So if we have a mandate to stay there, to send a very clear message to Russians that, we're here to make sure that Ukraine is not attacked, at least, what we can agree on, it might work. So, let's see how the mandate is shaped.
So there's a lot of discussions in future about this, or we don't have time?
Exactly. We're still discussing, we have many summits, already, probably many planned. I would like to see many decisions made.
Can you predict, I don't know, when we will have an agreement on this decision?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, I feel that I disappointed you with quite negative positions, so I don't want to go any further than this.
Okay, and finally, I'd like to ask some questions about your political career. You have actually received widespread international attention. You are regularly quoted in the media. Yet in Lithuania, you were more like, I don't know, controversial politician. You decided to step away from politics after election defeat. So what is your explanation? Why did you lose elections in Lithuania?
Well, that's how democracy works. Some cases you win, some cases you lose.
Yeah, but there should be, why voters didn't choose you. So they had motivation, and how you can explain it.
It's really difficult, to find an exact explanation. I think that one of the explanations was that, the party, my party was associated with quite a lot of crises that we went through over the 4 years of, when we were in power. And then people just wanted something different, But then again, I've always believed that we did the right thing. I would not change, anything, from our, the way that we dealt with the crises. And I accept the price that we had to pay.
So you don't have this inner critic who says that you did something wrong?
No, I mean, personally, there's always things that you believe that, you could have done differently. That's, that's normal human, thinking. But as a, politically, pushing the line and really, trying to defend the country the best way you think that you're doing it, I think it is always the right thing.
Do you see yourself in politics in future?
Well, it remains to be seen.
What what circumstances can be there to you to return in politics?
No, I'm not going to hypothesize.
Okay, you don't answer that, so we will see in the future. Maybe you will have some decisions on that. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Visnotaļ daudz satraucošu atziņu, bet cerams, ka darīsim labāko, lai sagatavotos krīzei, bet tā tomēr nepienāks. Paldies jums, ka skatījāties, un uz tikšanos pēc nedēļas.